Yesterday I hadn't eaten and I did a 24-hour fast, so I was like in my body yesterday. I felt like a lot of, I mean, I know you've done it before, but when you get on those fasts and you just get like all this energy, like I couldn't even sleep.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah, I just loved it.
Yeah, the fact you get energy from fasting is very strange. I've done a lot of 24 hours. I haven't done anything more than that, though. I've been thinking about doing one of them 3-day ones.
Yeah.
A lot of people I know that did 3-day ones.
I heard that George St. Pierre talk about he does it 3 or 4 times a year.
I think it's probably really good to give your digestion a chance to rest. Like
Yeah.
you're just constantly eating food. Your body's like, Jesus, like more work. Like give it some time off.
Do you think it's possible, like in ancient times, that because sometimes in the Bible they'll say people live to 400, 500 years old. Do you think it's not 400, but do you think it's possible people were living to as long as 120 years old back then?
Yeah, maybe 120. Yeah, in a rare genetic case with very good nutrition in a blue zone, some place where there's a lot of minerals in the water. Yeah, you might be able to. It's possible. Right. 120s. People have gotten there before. But the 500 years old, like Noah, like, oh, get the fuck out of here.
Well, I think it's true, but I think it's one of those things where they probably just took records differently back then. Mm-hmm. Like I think in China, I think you only celebrate your birthday once every 10 years.
Oh.
So you could be like, oh, I'm 500, but you're really not.
Well, that would mean you're 5.
Yeah, exactly.
50.
Right.
But I think, human beings biologically, the only thing that's going to change how we age is science, and they're pretty close to being able to do that with a lot of things. And there's a few things you could do to mitigate aging today, and it does work. It does help you, but 500 years old. It's most likely that they just didn't know what the fuck they were talking about.
350 years after the flood. He died at the age of 950. There you go. Terah was 128.
Noah,
pedophile.
as the extremely long-lived antediluvian patriarchs, died 350 years after the flood at the age of 950 when Terah was 128. The maximum human lifespan, as depicted by the Bible, gradually diminishes thereafter from almost 1,000 years to 120 years of Moses.
See what I'm saying?
Huh.
Now, that's Old Testament. So, I don't know. A lot of that stuff was story stuff.
Yeah.
But, dude, I'm telling you, this book, Case for Christ, the fucking history, it's not even an opinion. He's not saying, I want you to believe. He's like, here's the history. Here's why we... Dude, so, like, if I said to you, Joe, you believe everything you've heard about Alexander the Great, right? You believe it. He's fought in these battles. What they say, you just believe it's Alexander the Great. I'll read his biography. You'd say, yeah, sure. But then you'd be like, oh, but I don't believe they made the shit up about Jesus. Okay, Alexander the Great, because what you'll always hear is, well, the Gospels were written 100 plus years after Jesus died. Alexander the Great's first biography was written like 300 years after he died. So that right there is like, well, the historians of Jesus were much closer in time than, say, Alexander the Great. And even furthermore, back then, like the ancient Hebrews, they didn't have, before writing, they didn't write anything, so they would memorize the Old Testament and the Scripture. So that you had guys that they would pass down, right? Mm-hmm. They knew 5,000 pages of book at the side of their head. So yes, the Gospels were 70 years later, but they were based off the accounts of people who were living at that time and up to like 25 years after it. And they say, oh, well, a game of telephone. I can tell you something goes around the room, telephone. By the time it gets to me, 10 people, what you just said is irrelevant. It's a totally different thing. I get it. But what they said is because of that ancient thing of, kind of having to pass down these Old Testaments because they couldn't write, it would be like if you're playing a game of telephone, but every person, I check with the person before to make sure the word I'm saying is right. Mm-hmm. And then I keep going. So then it's going to work because you're constantly checking. So that's what they said happened there. And I was like, okay.
Well, that's a little bit of confirmation bias because the real problem is like who said it originally.
So
and who decided what the words were originally?
Okay, that I get that, which is true. But just for Jesus, this book was saying that the reason why they believe the historical accuracy of it is because his haters and the disciples were both saying the same thing. So you have the Romans saying, yeah, this is what happened, who hated him, and at that point would be like, get this guy out of here. He's basically causing a revolt. That's why we have to kill him. He's like somebody getting, imagine, a protester today. They were like, fuck this guy. He's out.
Right.
And so they were saying, yeah, what you're saying happened. And then the disciples are saying it. Like a big thing is the resurrection, right? People say, really? He fucking resurrected from the dead? And you're like, well, everybody agreed, haters, Romans, and the Jewish people, everybody agreed he died. That's 100%. That's why when they stab him and you say water came out, it wasn't water, it was fluid from his lungs because he was dead. And that's what would happen to you or I when we die, is we have this lung fluid that comes out. So that's what they said, oh, that's water. And that's what they made him divinity. But it was like a natural thing. He's dead. Everyone agrees. And you say, well, they buried him in a tomb. And then the next day, or 3 days later, the tomb's empty. And people are like, so, that made up. And they say 500 people saw him in the town. Romans and Hebrew, they saw him over the next couple of weeks. 500 independently sourced people, real, like corroborated, 500 people saw him. So you say, okay, so there's that. And then the other conspiracy theory is like, well, the disciples robbed his body. The disciples just robbed his body because they didn't want him. They would hand over crucifixion victims to like the wild dogs. That used to be the way it was. If you got crucified, throw you in a pit, wild dogs eat you, or leave you on the cross, birds will eat you. That's how we deal with you. So they're like, that's why they were taking his body. And then you see that, well, that's probably not what happened. And the Romans themselves acknowledge there's no body in that tomb that we put in there 3 days ago. The body is not there, and we did it. So in order to save ourselves, we're going to say the apostles robbed it. But in reality, that's just a conspiracy because the apostles would have no reason to rob it.
So the Romans think the apostles robbed the body.
That's a conspiracy.
Why do you say conspiracy?
Well,
you're saying a conspiracy to diminish the story.
No. I meant conspiracy in the sense of that's what people say as a reason why the.
Did the Romans say that?
The Romans have said that. The Romans said that back then, and then I guess conspiracy is the wrong word because I'm not like it's one story, one explanation. I'll say,